Welcome to my breakdown of the hook mechanic for the game Speedrunners. The hook can be used while stationary or while in motion by pressing the input key. When the input key is pressed and held, the hook is launched at an angle rather than a straight line on the X or Y axis. This is because Speedrunner's core mechanic is racing, and the hook can be used to pull the player forward and give them momentum and speed. If the hook is launched in front or above the player, it wouldn't work because oftentimes there is nothing in front of the player to grab to give the player momentum. And a vertical shot would actually pull the player back if the hook connected due to the hook point being behind the player when it hits. The angled pull launches a player forward, giving them an edge on their opponents. The hook's length depends on the hold time of the input pressed. The hook's launch is almost instant. I measured the speed over a distance using the player as a unit. My results showed that the hook moved at 4 units per 0.1 seconds. I believe this is set up this way because the players are constantly moving and need that kind of instantaneous results in order for this to be a viable mechanic. If the player only presses the button instead of holding, the hook will only go a short distance. The longer the player holds the button, the longer the hook will shoot. The hook returns to the player when they release the input button. The hook can only connect to a white marked ceiling. If there is no white on the ceiling, the hook will bounce off and return to the player. If there is white, the hook will pull the player upwards and forwards until the player lets go of the input button, in which it will propel the player forward and help them gain speed. The hook has no limit on distance for which it can be launched and how far it can go. The hook reacts to ceilings with both the white indicator and those without. If the hook is launched in an area with no ceiling, if the player is holding the input button, the hook will keep going until it hits something other than opponents. While doing this in an area with no ceiling, if the player does hold the button, they will notice that the character's animation gets stuck in place on the last frame of the hook animation and they can still control the character's movements like jumping and running. While extended, the hook can go through platforms and objects as well as opponents. The only physical point on the hook is the hook itself. The cable does not have a collider. The hook's point does not affect other players like stated. However, it can be used to hit objects and opponents' pickups like crates to prevent them from hitting the player and impeding their progress while running. The hook has 3 distinct sound effects. The first is the initial launch of the hook when the player presses the input button. This sound effect plays as soon as they press the input button. The second is that the hook hits a white ceiling. This plays a sound effect that sounds like it's latching onto the ceiling or a latching cue to let the player know it latched onto the ceiling. The third and last sound effect it plays is when the hook reflects off of objects or areas and ceilings without the white indicator. This is a clang-like sound to let the player know as an audio cue that it did not connect. Thanks for watching.